Hey, welcome along to Southside. No, it's not Southside United Time for Kids. That's tomorrow. Oh dear, I'm getting all confused. Welcome along. It's Tuesday evening. Great to have you all along. Now's the time when we meet to talk about things to do with ministry with young people, families, children. So welcome. As always, want to take a moment. Don't know if you can hear Oliver in the background, but hello, Ollie. Want to take a moment to recognize that God has created this world and God has blessed and given different peoples to care for the land. And the land that Southside meets on for a long time, the Yaga and the Turrbal people cared for that land. So we pay our respects to elders past, present and emerging. And thank you for their custodianship of this land. And we pray that as we care for this land, that we will care for it in just the same way, remembering that God has given it to us and listening to God who inspires us. So, welcome along. Great to have you all here. Rod has popped in and Rod has popped out again. Hopefully he'll pop back and hopefully we'll get audio things and everything worked out. I don't know. Some people are still having problems and missing parts of what I'm saying, which, I don't know, might not be a bad thing. But hopefully we can get it all sorted. Now, our movie quotes. We haven't had a movie quote person for a while. Trying to think what last week's was. It was something over here in my collection. You haven't seen my DVD collection. Do you want to see my DVD collection? You can, well, our DVD collection. This is part of our DVD collection. So we can turn around and go. There it is. That's our DVD collection. There you go. Oh, that's most of it. None of Ollie's stuff in there, and few other things hiding around. That's most of our DVDs. So I'm trying to think what was last week. So I'm quickly looking through our DVDs. I cannot remember what it was, but no one got it. Oh dear. Can't even remember what it was. There you go. So if anyone remembers, you can put the quote in the box and I'll tell you what it came from. I don't know. So this week, someone popped in and popped out. Sorry, I'm not paying attention. This week, movie quote. Ready? It's going straight to the pool room. There you go. What movie does that come from? That's going straight to the pool room. Maybe this is my pool room. Who knows? So, welcome along. Yeah, see, now I'm still trying to work out what I did last week. That'll bug me for the rest of the night. No, it's not jumping out at me. Which is strange because it obviously jumped out at me last week going, ooh, say me, but it's not there today. Okay, anyway, focus, Richard, focus. So, been looking through some of what Andrew Root has said about Charles Taylor. So Charles Taylor's book, 700 odd pages long, A Secular Age. Hands up, I haven't read it. You probably haven't read it either. Good on you. And so exploring some of what he has to say. And so remember, Andy Root talked about, Taylor sort of splits it up into, we had secular 0. Kylie's got the quote for today, came from the castle. I didn't even have to go to, what's that, love? Sponge. Oh, what do you do with it? Iced it. Oh, it's how you do it, love. That was my next quote from the castle. Didn't even go though. There, you had it already. Probably too easy. I should have started with the what do you do with it, love, and moved to this is going straight to the pool room, shouldn't I? Anyway, back on task. So, secular 0. What the world was pretty much up until about the 1500s, where there were angels, there were demons, and it all affected our lives, and our lives were porous, and these things came, and things had value and power. And then we moved to secular 1, where it became that split between the public and the private, and it became more, how do I convince your will to do the things that God wants you to do, sort of stuff. And then secular 3, that was secular 1. Secular 2, that sense of, people are leaving the church. And how do we, come up with the best service that will convince people that they want to come along to our church? And then secular 3, a movement where we're focused on the immanent frame, and we've to some degree lost, or very much lost, that sense of the transcendent. And how do we get that back? And so Andy Root, in the third lecture, where he talks about authenticity, and authenticity, Taylor talks about we are in the age of authenticity. And I remember 20 years ago now, chatting with the young adults worker who was also at college at the time with me, at the church we were at, and talking about how authenticity is important for young adults. And so, yes, we're now in this age of authenticity. It's all about how am I authentically me. But Andy Root says, we need to keep these seculars in mind, because when someone says, oh, we're in a secular world, well, which secular do you mean? So he says, if you look at America, you might say that America is the most secular country in the world. If you take secular one, where there is a divide between the public and the private. So you look at America was, built on this sense of, there is no state religion. There is a division between state and church. Absolutely. So in that sense, they are possibly, or one of the most secular countries, if you take secular one as your base. Of course, if you take secular two as your base, then they're sliding down, but they're by no way that means, less people are going to church. Yes, it's true in America, but there are countries that are far more, Scandinavian countries, England, even Australia, that's far more our thing. So it's when you want to talk about secular, which one do we mean? It's important to keep in our minds. He was also noting that, and again, last time, I'm sure I wrote these down again. I can't find where I wrote them. Last time we talked about, there it is, that in that sense, secular zero, it was all about access. How do I get access to God? How do I get access to the spiritual beings out there? How do I get access to the things that have power? Secular one, as it becomes the public and private, how do I get you to demonstrate your faith in the public space? So, how do we run evangelism things so that you go and publicly declare your faith? How do we, confirmation became very important, things like that. Secular two was very much about participate. How do we get participation? How do we get participation in the church? How do we have the best service so you participate in it? And Andy Root in this lecture was suggesting that secular three is about to believe again through encounter. I start to believe again because I've encountered something. I've encountered the transcendent sort of thing. So that sense of, if secular two is about participation, he said it's actually interesting if you look at the Europeans where participation is low, they actually tend to downplay what they've done. When they've done surveys and how often do you go to church? For the Europeans, they tend to probably didn't, maybe once a month. And if you follow those same people and get them to write a diary, you actually discover that they actually go more often than they would say. Whereas America, it's the opposite. Americans, we went every week, and you might discover they went once a month. So it's that interesting thing of, again, we look at things differently in different parts of the world. It's always important for us to remember. Again, and all this secular stuff is sort of true of the Western world, probably not true of necessarily in Asia, in Africa. So again, this is all about just helping us to try and understand and to try and give us language to how we understand. So Taylor talks about, in secular 3, we have the immanent frame. And we look at things and we might have an open take or a closed spin. Now, big words, you go, oh, that's going to hurt my head. Yes. So the open take is that sense where you look for possibilities. So there's openness, there's possibilities here. I can look and I can see opportunities. that I'm open to new things. I'm open to new ideas. The closed spin is, well, I reject anything that doesn't fit within my immanent frame. So, I talk about the religion, well, that's just rubbish. Why would anyone believe that stuff? So we have an open take. I'm open to possibilities. Closed spin. I reject anything that's sort of outside my immanent frame. And he says, Taylor suggests that in secular 3, we have a new ethic. And that new ethic is authenticity. And that's not just a social sensibility, we're meant to be authentic, but it's actually sort of embedded in our moral ethic. That, you need to be authentic as a person. I need to be authentic as a person. And so I have no idea what I've written there. Oh, that's right. And so Taylor, again, last week we talked about, Taylor isn't into sort of the narratives, well, we lost this and therefore we got to here. So we lost prayer in school, so therefore we became secular. Whereas Taylor says we build. So we've built to get to secular 3. So it isn't a loss of morals. We've lost morals, so now we're trying to be authentic. No. It's actually, we've built up. And it's that interesting thing of, we can often look at things and go, this is a loss. When I was in New South Wales, there was a movement in school, so teaching what in New South Wales is called SRE, Special Religious Education, which recognises that in the curriculum there's some education about religions, whereas people from the church come in and do special religious education where we teach about the religion that we believe in. And there was a recognition that numbers of people were not connecting in with SRE anymore. But there was a recognition that there was something about the morals and those sort of things that were taught in SRE that these kids that weren't doing SRE were actually missing out on. And so there was the move to go, we'll have SRE and we'll have ethics. And numerous Christians went, we're losing, people are just going to go and do ethics and, we've lost, or we're losing these people and they'll go and do that and they're not learning the Christian values. Whereas you can look at it and go, wow, isn't this great? They're actually, the education department is seeing that there's something that we've got that these kids over here who aren't doing SRE are actually missing out on, and they want to replace it. And the thing that some ministers discovered is, well, the schools actually, to run ethics, need to find people to run the ethics class. And anyone who's been around a church long enough has heard enough appeals of we need SRE or RI teachers. So some of the ministers got trained to do the ethics class. I went, hey, we'll do your ethics class. They couldn't necessarily input the Christian stuff, but they could teach it in a way that helps kids to explore and to understand some of those ethical things. And, there are opportunities. We need to watch out that we don't go for the we're losing narrative. But in that sense, sometimes we're building. And so this sense of this move to authenticity isn't a loss of morals, but it's, it can be a building. It can be a positive thing. And so Andy Roots says, Taylor would say, that the key thing is no human being should tell another human being how they should live their life. That every human being has a right to define them for themselves what it means to be human. So this is this age of authenticity we live in. You need to be authentic to who you are. I have no right to tell you what you need to believe or what you need to be. You need to be you. And so this is this key ethic, which like lots of people in church go, no, that's so wrong. We can't say that. Obviously, you need to follow the rules of the church. But of course, God made us each individual. And to some degree, we need to discover who we are. What are the giftings that God has given us? And yes, there is a moral framework that we live within, but part of our faith is about discovering who we are as an individual. So we shouldn't be so scared about this. And so that sense of, it's about, I need to define for myself what it means to be human. So there should be no outside reality unless I'm willing to take it on. So I go, yes, there's this greater being called God. I'm willing to follow and take on what that. But I can't sort of say that's there and implant that on you if I'm not willing to do that. Sort of what he's getting at, I think. And so Taylor thinks this is an advance. And I can see that. And I can accept that. This sense of authenticity, of taking on what is true for us, can be advanced. If you want to hold on to everyone has to believe exactly what I believe, it's obviously falling apart. But if you've got that openness, then yeah, that's fine. Yes, work out who you are. And so in that that authenticity is that you should follow what speaks to you and need to let others discover what speaks to them. And so that's that whole sense of how do we allow experience so people can see what speaks to them and how God speaks to them. Again, if we're allowing people to have these experiences, then God will speak to them. We believe in a God. And Jesus says, ask and you will find. Seek and you will find. Ask and you will receive. Take two. Ask and you will receive. Seek and you will find. Knock and the door will be open to you. So that sense of God promises that as we look for him, he will answer. So as we allow people to experience God, God will rock up and God will allow them to experience him. So how do we allow that? Taylor then links some of his ideas with Durkheim, another philosopher. And so splits it into sort of three ages. You had the ancient regime, which is sort of secular zero. And then you get the age of modern mobilization, which is sort of comes into being around the times of the revolutions. So you move from the ancient regime where the king sits on the throne and is the embodiment of God sitting on his heavenly throne. And that's really what the French Revolution challenges, is that divine right of the king. The king is there because God has put them in their place and they rule as sort of God on earth. And the French Revolution went, we're not into that. England didn't have that revolution or as much because in that sense they didn't have as strong a thought as that. And ultimately that's why Charles I is beheaded, because he's trying to push that. And his successors then wisely go, hey, let's not do that. That's not going to work. Hey, DMAC. Bye, DMAC. And then from age of mobilization, you move into the age of authenticity. And the age of authenticity, everyone must work out how to live. So in the age of mobilization, you come together in the people and try to work out what it means. In the age of authenticity, each person works out, what does it mean to live? What does it mean to be a human being? How do I be the best human being I can be? And so if you imagine those three on top, and down the bottom, the Durkheimium sort of has a paleo, a neo, and a post. Paleo very much like the ancient regime, secular zero, neo sort of like the age of mobilization, and post the age of authenticity. And that's sort of the structure. And I think Taylor, definitely Andy Root, suggests that the church is actually out of kilter. And so for many mainline Protestant denominations, they're very big on the ideas of the age of authenticity. It's all, yes, we're going to, accept the homosexuals in, we're going to, stand up for LGBTI rights, stuff like that. We're going to put women in preaching. We're going to do all these things. Be who you want to be. Absolutely age of authenticity type ideas. But when it comes to their structure, it's all about sort of the neo. It's very structured, sort of as you had during that age of mobilization. We set up a denominational structure. There is a hierarchy. We have a hymn book. We do these set prayers and all these sorts of things. So it's sort of that off kilter where it sort of you wouldn't say this, but to some sort of our teaching type stuff is Age of Authenticity. Our structure is Neo. Whereas if you look at the sort of evangelical Pentecostal type arm, their practice is very post-Dirkonium. That very, yes, throw out the hymn books, throw out the liturgical structure, we'll do it as we want, and get rid of the hierarchical structure of the denomination, we'll try and be non-denominational type churches, things like that. But if you look at their teaching, it's very much back in the age of mobilization type stuff. That very structured. No, it's you've got to follow the rules. There is a moral thing, and you've got to follow what God says to do. And so it's that interesting thing of, we are in different places and we are crossed. And Andy Root says he doesn't know if it would work better if some of us were actually in line of what we said matched our structures. Does that work? Who knows? I would tend to suspect maybe it would, but there you go. That's part of the exploring and discovering we are in a new age of doing things. What will that mean? So part of our challenge, they say, is that we want to lead people to open takes. So we want to, in the church, in our faith, in our evangelism, open people within their imminent frame to where they have an open take, where they're open to possibilities, particularly open those possibilities of God interacting in their lives and open to those opportunities of faith. And so Taylor talks about the difference between seekers and dwellers. Now you're hearing seekers and you're thinking seeker-sensitive service. Open your head, take that out, throw it away, close your head. Taylor's using seekers in a different way. So again, that joy of in the church, we have words that we know mean something, and then someone else uses it for something completely different. It's like, bother. So Taylor too believes that to live well in secular 3, which secular 3 is about how do I live well? He says to live well, it is to believe again. And so to become a seeker, a seeker is someone who is on the journey. I'm on the journey. I'm a pilgrim walking the spiritual journey. And I will use that language with people. Yes, faith is about a journey. People might say to me, oh, look, I'm not a person of faith. It's like, that's okay. You are on a spiritual journey, and that will lead you whoever knows. And we just need to look around us and discover that people go on all sorts of spiritual journeys. Some just, I was in the church, grew up under the pew, and I'm in part of the church. Others, well, I was in and then I was out, and then I came back, but then I drifted again, and then we're all on our own journey. And so part of the challenge for the church is, how do we invite people on that journey? How do we help them to be seekers? Because if the church isn't being seekers, then we tend to be people who dwell. And people who dwell tend to have a closed spin. Now we are the church here. You come to us. We don't like you out there. We sing songs like Onward Christian Soldiers Marching on to War because we're against the infidel out there. Oh! So yes, are we a church that dwells? We're here. Not necessarily open to others. Or are we seekers who are on a journey? And Taylor suggests that you can tell whether someone has an open take, is open possibilities, or a closed spin by telling them the story of St. Francis of Assisi. So St. Francis of Assisi is as a young man and teenager, comes from a very wealthy family in the town of Assisi. I bet you didn't guess he was going to come from there, did you? Oh, you did? Yeah. Okay. So he comes from this wealthy family, and he sort of lives the teenage life. But then he has this encounter with God. And God says, go and build my church. Or rebuild my church. And so he looks around, there's this old church down in sort of near his village, and so he goes and starts to rebuild that. That wonderful thing of when we take God very seriously when God's using metaphor type thing. And eventually he's all about, how do I do this faith stuff? And his dad's like, look, we've got this money. You are part of this rich family. You need to, sort of come back into line. And eventually his dad brings him before the city officials. And his dad says to him, look, either you come into line with the family or you lose it all. All the money and stuff goes. You don't get it. And what Francis does is he takes off his clothes and he walks out of there naked and says, that's fine, don't want it. And Taylor says, you can tell what you have. If you've got a closed spin, you're going, see, that's the problem with religion. It makes people do crazy things. I mean, that's just stupid. Of course you're going to get the money. Why would you do... See, that's religious fundamentalism. Has meant he's got these stupid ideas and he's gone off and done the wrong thing. Whereas if you've got an open take, you go, that's amazing. Well, I probably would not do that. But, wow, someone believes something enough that they would just give up everything to go and follow. That's amazing. And that's what we hope to bring out in people, in the church. And so that sense, how do our services, how does our preaching become allowing people to develop an open take? And so how do we share stories? Because short stories have power and hold something special. How do we share our stories of faith that allow people to go, wow, that's something amazing. God has rocked up there. God has been there. So that sense of in Southside, we've started this practice of each Sunday having a chance, or most Sundays having a chance in the service for people to stand up and go, this is where I've seen God this week. This is how I'm thankful to God this week. This is where God has been. Which allows us to start to tell those stories. Wow, these other people have been hearing. I'm going to watch and see where God is this week. And maybe God will turn up in my life as he's turned up in those people's lives. And start to allow an open take. And so, again, that sense of how are we starting to develop places where we allow people to hear the stories of God impacting us? How do we encourage them to start to allow God and start to encounter God? Because as they encounter God, they will encounter the transcendent. And God promises he will rock up. He will turn up. That's our call. That our call is no longer we live in secular one where we need to convince you to do the things God wants you to do. Our call is no longer we need to have the best service. We need to have the smickest music. Our call is how are we producing services where people encounter God? How are we preaching in ways that show that we are encountering God and encouraging others to encounter God? How are we allowing space within our services and in our ministries for people to meet with God? That as we do this, then we will connect with the secular three world that we live in now. It's our challenge. So we need to work out, again, we need to know what is the world that we're working in so that we can answer the questions that the world we're working in is asking. Because if we're answering the secular one questions or the secular two questions, then most people are going to miss it. Because they're not the questions they're asking. They're not asking why they should believe, in the Trinity. They're going, how does this affect their world that they live in? And if we can show this is how God affects our imminent frame, then maybe they'll go, I'm willing to open and to look for opportunities to experience this God. Because there's obviously maybe there's something there. And when they have those moments of God's transcendent breaking into the world, they'll stop and go, hang on, I've heard about this. Maybe I've got some language and some things that I can do around. So there's our challenge. And continues to be our challenge as we work with young people. But as we work with everyone, how are we changing our focus and our message? Thanks for joining us again. It's about half an hour. It's great to have you. Some of you have popped in and popped out, so you're obviously still having problems. I don't know. Maybe we'll look at other platforms or something like that. I don't know. Maybe you'll all just have to watch me later and then comment. I don't know. We'll work out something. Maybe. Thanks for joining us. Have a great week. If I don't see you before, I'll see you next Tuesday. Same time. See you later.